The B-17 was hailed as the flying fortress, bristling with 50 caliber machine guns and wrapped in armor from nose to tail. It looked unstoppable in propaganda films, yet entire groups of them went down in flames over Europe. The intro poses the unsettling question that drives the film: how could something called a fortress fall so often? Was the legend greater than the reality, or was there more to the story than the rows of gun barrels sticking out from its sides? Would you have trusted a flying fortress to bring you home? The idea behind the flying fortress was simple. If you armed a bomber heavily enough, it could defend itself. When the Boeing engineers laid out the B-17's design in the late 1930s, they placed machine guns almost everywhere a fighter might attack. A twin-gun turret in the nose, a top turret covering the skies above, waist gunners scanning the sides, a ball turret swinging like an eye beneath the fuselage, and a pair of 50 caliber guns guarding the tail. 13 guns in total, a porcupine of firepower. American airplanners believed this was the answer to Europe's flak-filled skies. Why risk building fleets of escort fighters when the bombers could be their own shields? In training films, the theory looked flawless. Enemy aircraft diving in from any direction would be caught in crossfire, riddled before they could fire a shot. Crews imagined themselves inside a steel wall bristling with barrels, where teamwork and firepower would cut down anything in the way. But the reality was harsher. Blind spots still existed. No gun could cover every angle at once, and the ball turret had a limited arc. Waist gunners sometimes fired so close to each other that their arcs overlapped, wasting shots or even risking friendly fire. German pilots studied these weaknesses carefully and soon discovered the angles where their attacks would draw the least punishment. The fortress could be breached, and once breached, it could be destroyed. So ask yourself, true or false, more guns automatically meant fewer losses. What do you think? The B-17's reputation often centered on its guns, but guns were only as effective as the men who pulled the triggers. Inside each fortress, 10 crew members were spread across a freezing, noisy, oxygen-starved world of aluminum and steel. For the gunners, the experience was closer to endurance torture than glory. The ball turret gunner, for example, was crammed into a glass sphere barely large enough to move in. Suspended beneath the bomber, he had no parachute. If the aircraft was hit and the turret jammed, escape was nearly impossible. Many died trapped in that tiny globe, staring at the ground rushing below. The tail gunner had his own lonely sentence, isolated at the very end of the bomber, watching fighters line up their shots. Waist gunners fought in icy slipstreams, standing by open windows that froze their hands stiff and made aiming almost impossible. At high altitudes, temperatures dropped to 40 below zero. Oxygen masks iced over, and fatigue made even the steadiest men slower on the trigger. Communication across the plain was clumsy, meaning each gunner fought his own private war, reacting in split seconds to streaking shapes that might vanish before he fired. Yet these same men recorded astonishing feats. Crews claimed fighters spinning into the ground after concentrated bursts, tales circulated of gunners firing until their barrels glowed red, refusing to stop even as their positions filled with smoke. Heroism and horror lived side by side in those tiny stations. One wrong move meant death, but one well-aimed burst could save an entire crew. So here's the question for you. Would you rather have been the tail gunner, staring death in the face, or the ball turret gunner, hanging beneath the bomber with nowhere to run? If one B-17 was deadly, imagine 20 of them flying together. That was the theory behind the combat box, the tactical formation that turned individual bombers into a moving fortress wall. Each plane was positioned so its guns overlapped with its neighbors, covering blind spots and multiplying firepower. A single formation could put hundreds of 50 caliber barrels into the sky at once. spewing out such a volume of fire that Luftwaffe pilots nicknamed it a hedgehog of steel. American commanders believed that as long as bombers flew in tight boxes, they could punch through any defense. At first, the results seemed promising. Fighters diving on one bomber found themselves caught in the sights of half a dozen others. Crews felt safer when surrounded by their own kind, the roar of four-engine power drowning out the sound of fear. But the combat box carried a terrible flaw. Those tight formations made ideal targets for German flak gunners. Black clouds of exploding shells burst in the middle of the cluster, shrapnel scything through wings, fuselages and crews. The very density that protected them from fighters made them irresistible to anti-aircraft guns. And when even one bomber fell out of position, a damaged engine, a hit fuel line, or a burst control cable, the box unraveled. Gaps opened, and German fighters dove straight through, isolating stragglers and tearing them apart. What was meant to be strength in unity could turn into a death sentence if cohesion broke. Crews knew it too. In the middle of flak and fire, one thought ran through every gunner's mind: stay in formation at all costs. Would flying in that box have made you feel safer or more exposed? Even after the war, the B-17 remained etched in memory as a symbol of American air power and sacrifice. It embodied both the promise and the peril of strategic bombing. A plane that could devastate enemy industry, yet could not escape the sky's brutal arithmetic of flak and fighters. Veterans remembered the camaraderie inside its cramped fuselage, the terrifying moments when an engine flamed out, or when the tail gunner's guns went silent. Aviation historians later debated whether the B-17's losses were justified by the results, but few denied its mythic aura. The flying fortress stood as a paradox, its name evoking invincibility, yet its history proving vulnerability. Still, in museums and air shows today, its silhouette commands reverence. Audiences see not just a machine, but the endurance of the men who climbed aboard, knowing full well that bristling guns were no guarantee of coming home.